Mario, welcome back, my friend.
Thanks, Jake.
Um,
Good to hear your
John,
voice, man.
yeah, you too, brother. Hey, can you tell me about John Fox's first acid trip? Who? I mean, that's not the NFL coach, is it?
No,
Okay.
no. Well, that would be a great story.
Yeah.
I'll hear that one.
Yeah, that would be.
Coach Fox's first acid trip. No, actually, it's just a funny story. It was just I was 2 years younger than my sister, and she hung out with guys that were generally a year or two older than her. And but I started smoking pot and then taking acid by the time I was 11. I was taking acid regularly, and so there were a lot of people that wanted to try acid, but well, the word around was you usually try and do it with someone who's done it before or who's just experienced in having taken it a number of times. So a lot of John Fox wanted this friend of my sister's who's a couple years older than her. So he's probably let's see. At this point, I was in junior high, so I was maybe 12. He was probably around 16. I know he drove, so he was at least 16. And he wanted to take acid, and he wanted me to take him on his first acid trip.
Yeah, right.
So let's see what my mom was out of town she was up visiting my grandmother. So we were home alone with my dad, who, as I told you, had his rage issues, so in the afternoon, my dad usually didn't get home from work till about 6. So in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock, John Fox comes over, and I've got the acid, and we take the LSD, and
was it liquid or was it tabs?
This was liquid.
Liquid. Yeah, we're gonna have to get into that later on. Continue.
Yeah, so I think we probably took around 200 mics, and so a pretty good hit. And so we get to do the first part of him coming on and stuff outside, which is sunny and nice, and but sure enough, after probably an hour and a half of tripping, my dad comes up the driveway.
Oh man!
And well, I knew this was going to happen, but I hadn't really thought about what I was going to do about it. See, I knew he was coming home, but I didn't really plan ahead. So what we ended up doing was taking John downstairs. My room was downstairs. The living area of the house, main area of the house, was upstairs. So my bedroom was downstairs with a bathroom that was kind of a little jog around the corner and through a door to this next to a workshop downstairs. So I put John in my bathroom, and for the entire the whole first 4 hours while he's peaking on acid.
Oh man!
He's in my bathroom.
Oh man! A lot of mirrors in there.
And I'm trying to stay with him, which means I'm conspicuously not around upstairs. So I'm having to try and make runs upstairs and say hi, Dad, and blah blah blah, and then go back downstairs. And of course, so at this point, John is relegated to the bathroom. So he makes himself comfortable. He's sitting on the toilet lid with his feet in the sink. And he's just kind of, doing moving his hands in front of his eyes and watching the tracers and stuff. And we're talking and bullshitting downstairs. And I'm making about every 20 minutes, I'm making a run upstairs just to show my face. And, of course, the inevitable happens. One time I go upstairs to show my face, and my dad stands up and bolts to the stairs and says, "What is going on down there?"
Oh, man.
It is Italian accent, right?
Oh,
and I go running for the stairs, and I'm trying to get around him, and he won't let me pass him.
Fuck.
And he comes downstairs, and he opens the shop door, and then he reaches to the bathroom door and swings it open, and there's John Fox sitting on the toilet with his feet in the sink, with his hand in front of his face, doing the swirly shit.
Yeah, he's facing.
And he looks over like an ostrich, It was hysterical. Anyway, so
Oh.
make a long story short, Dad says, "Get your asses upstairs. I'm going to chew you out for a while." Right? So we have to go upstairs and sit in front of my father, who's got these giant hands, and his hands at that point look like baseball mitts, right? They're just huge, and he's pointing fingers, and they're just like flying past us in 3D, and his face, I remember his face had just had universes swirling across it, right?
Oh my God.
And we're trying not to just bust up.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Right. No, I did.
I look serious. Oh my God, Jake, it was so fun. And then so finally he ends up chewing us out, and then wants to hug us, which was pretty scary. And then sends us off to bed. So we go down to my bedroom, and we just laid on my bed in the dark for the rest of the night. And I had this image of John Fox's face in neon green floating in front of my head for the next 3 or 4 hours. I don't know how long it was.
Where was your sister during this whole time?
She was with my mom.
Okay, so they were. It was her boyfriend, would you say, or just a guy she was friends with?
He was just a guy she knew. I think they ended up dating or something. But,
right. So I mean, the bottom line is that your dad never even he wasn't even aware of LSD, right? I mean, he never really even knew.
No, he was very aware of LSD.
He was. How did he become first aware of? Was it your brother? How did he know about LSD?
Well, it was a big topic in the news, you know. People were taking a lot of LSD. It was very.
Can you talk as best you can for somebody like me? And I think it's important. We talked in one of our first conversations about the summer of '66. But what was in the news about it? The fact that it was legal. The fact that it was. I mean, I'd love you to paint this picture of what it was being. What were they talking about?
Well. First of all, the first thing they were talking about was making it illegal, because it was initially not illegal. When it first was being tested and experimented with, it was not an illegal substance.
Absolutely.
So the first news was that there's this drug, people are doing it a lot. We're running into problems with the counterculture abusing it, and Art Linkletter's daughter jumped off a building thinking she could fly, and that was a big story, and so it became touted as dangerous and in the news, and
let me ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. This is important. Did they explain before Linkletter? I never even knew that story, but before they started to tie it to the counterculture as a nefarious thing. Did they explain why it was legal to begin with, and how easily accessible was it? Dave Getz, the drummer from Big Brother, said that there was a place called the League for Internal Freedom. This is around '65, and if you had a card, you can go and get it. But I know that you had the Swiss neighbor, the Swiss pharmaceutical person, but. I mean, did they explain, was it clear why it was legal? I mean, obviously they wanted to do it because as a truth serum, they thought for prisoners of war or something like that.
Every new compound is legal. Every new compound starts out legal. Mm-hmm. And then for it to become marketed, it has to be tested and okayed by the FDA. But initially every compound, like every baby, is sin-free.
Sure.
All chemicals that are compounds that are manufactured are initially legal until they are found to be a problem of some kind. Right. Yeah. So they it was very early on, but nevertheless, it was being produced and it was still legal and people were taking it. Yeah. So
continue on. How? I mean, this is fascinating. This is so interesting. You were so young, at such a young age. Uh-huh. You were privy to some of the most purest acid. I mean, in comparison to me, in college, I didn't do acid till college, and by that point, sometimes it was a hit, a really nice hit, and sometimes it was a sugar cube that had speed in it and was all funky. But I mean.
Belladonna, a lot of belladonna. That shit was horrible.
Oh my God! I mean, bad trips. And sometimes your constitution just can't really handle it. But I mean, can you talk about how you got originally at 11 years old got access to bottles of liquid acid?
Well, I didn't have access to the liquid till I was probably 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking, like, usually most of the time I was taking barrel tabs of Orange Sunshine. I know that one Christmas, this was pretty funny. One Christmas, I had asked for a slot car set for Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I was, probably 10 or 11. It was for one of my first few trips. And so the night before Christmas, I decided that I was going to set my alarm for 5 a.m., take a full barrel tab of Orange Sunshine, which was 4 hits.
I'm sorry, that's
and
so
I was
ridiculous.
and then I was going to go back to sleep and wake up peaking on Christmas morning.
Sure.
This was my idea of a fun Christmas.
Yeah, right.
In hindsight, this is terrifying to me that a young child would be doing shit like this.
Well, you know what it is? I think it's very creative that you actually, the idea of trying to fall back asleep is beyond me. But go ahead. I mean, go. I love it. I love it.
Well, it totally worked. It totally worked. I had my little Sony clock radio, and it came on at 5. I had the barrel tab stashed by my comic books, and I took the barrel tab, and I went back to sleep. And when my mom woke me up, man, I was flying, man. I mean, I was so high, and then of course, what do I get for Christmas? Slot cars. I don't know if you've ever seen a slot car when you're tracing, peaking on acid, man, but it's pretty wild. It was next to impossible to control them, because they were just, there's hundreds of them on the track. I only had 2, but it looked like thousands of them, so it was just
Yeah, it's like what you were talking about before, why you walked away from classical music, because the orchestra conductor, his baton started to look like a fan blade.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
There's just trails everywhere. Yeah, I mean,
you're right.
This is like, how did you truly though? How did you
gain access to the liquid?
No. Well, that we can get to that, but I'm more to the point. Like, I mean, the idea that like, I just in general, how did you not bug out in front of your parents when you were tripping that hard?
I know I did. I think I have to think that there was some denial at work there with my folks.
Something.
It had to be. I mean, I try and put myself in in fact, when my kids were around that age, I started thinking about, what would I do, or I was their age when I was doing these things, and I know that I wasn't innocent like they were at 10 and 11. I was different, and I part of it might have been exposure. I was already, playing electric, and so I was playing with people 10 years older than me, generally, and certainly frequently. And I aspired to be my brother, who was at that time. So he was 11 years older than me. So if I aspired to be like my brother, I aspired to be a long-haired, acid-taking musician. That's what I aspired to be.
With a huge rig. But, yeah. I mean, just ridiculous. Yeah, continue.
Yeah. So and as far so that's all I can say is that was my role model. He was my idol. It was working fine for him, and all these, and every time we go to one of his shows, there were thousands of people on acid. Period. That's just the way it was, and it was pretty obvious. And how my parents didn't just bust me on it or accuse me of it ever, never. I was never, no one ever sat me down and said, I know you're doing drugs, or nothing. So I honestly, maybe they were just climatized to it because we went to the shows all the time and everybody acted weird, so why wouldn't their kids act weird? I don't know. I couldn't actually tell you. Was I good at maintaining myself? Yeah, I was damn good at it, really good at it. Can you
talk about how you kept it together constitutionally? I think that is absolutely paramount, because I mean you're already putting yourself on a high wire, going out with musicians 10 years older than you are, taking acid at an early age, but keeping yourself together like that. I mean,
I don't know, man. I've thought about it a lot, Jake. Honestly, and I thought about it in a lot of different contexts too. Like how much, what role did the LSD taking play in my psychiatric difficulties? I don't know. I can't say. I don't know. How did I not get caught by my folks? I think that has more to do with their denial than my acting abilities. Although I was pretty damn good at covering myself, I remember being good at it, and since my dad had that rage quality, I must say that we were taught from a very early age how to get around my dad. And my mom taught us that, and I don't say that in an accusatory way, but she felt it was necessary for us, for our kind of survival in any degree of a happy childhood, to learn how to get around my dad, who was a strict disciplinarian and a kind of a rageaholic. So
this doesn't make this.
We learned at an early age to read parents and skate around,
sure,
dodge,
But but just to be clear, he knew about LSD because it was in the news, but he never even assumed that you guys were taking it, or maybe he just because this is a cocktail for a disaster. I mean, a strict disciplinarian, total anti-drug, and totally kids that are way off the grid. It's amazing to me how this stuff comes together and works out the way it does. It's amazing.
Well, Jake, a couple of years later, when I was 14, I think I told you about the Studio X sessions. It was my brother had just quit Quicksilver. This was in 1970. He had quit Quicksilver, and they were living in Hawaii recording, and he left the band, came home, brought one of the Studer 8-track 2-inch tape recorders that that Capitol had leased for them. Brought one of them home, put it in his living room, built a makeshift studio there, and wanted to just do a bunch of recording. And he wanted me to be the bass player. So, and my mom really, I told Mom, and she liked the idea, and certainly never mentioned it to my father. So we had to get me down to these recording sessions that were starting anywhere between 8 and 10 o'clock at night, and that were going to run all night, and work it around my dad. So, she coached me to after dinner, do your homework, pretend you're going to bed, and then you can slip out and I'll cover for you.
Wow.
And I would slip out the bottom back door of the house and walk down to my brother's house, which was 2 blocks from our house. And I would walk down with my bass, and I would, meet, the coke dealer that was there every night for my, first initial snorts, and we'd get to playing.
How old were you at this? What were you about 15?
14.
14 years. So again,
sophomore in high school.
Sophomore in high school, your brother splits from Quicksilver, comes home with an 8-track. He's got a house, and we're getting into to these sessions. Continue, please.
Well, not really so much the sessions. We were kind of talking about how I worked around I was kind of taught to work around my dad,
right?
Because of the LSD thing, and this was just an example of how I had help getting around that. And whether my mom knew or not, I have to think she had her suspicions. I was pretty open with my mom later on. By the time I was 14, 15, about using LSD, she didn't. I could see that it worried her, but she never scolded me or anything like that. She was a bit of an enabler, actually. I'll tell you the truth. But
she was also she was a musician. She kind of understood whether or not she ever acknowledged it. She must have understood the gypsy lifestyle, to some degree.
I think she understood how far putting her thumb on me, or anyone putting their thumb on me, was going to get them. Right. I think she probably, knowing herself, because she was a very rebellious young woman when she was young, and so she probably just added 2 and 2 up and thought, well, I better support him, and I'm ever grateful that she did.
Do your brother? Can you just spend a minute talking about your brother? I mean, was it the idea that he like your parents had children very far apart. Like they had your brother and your sister, and then they had you. 10 years apart.
Yeah, 11 years difference. My mom and her first husband had my brother and his twin, and so they were 11 when I was born.
Oh, so your dad is not their biological father.
Right.
Interesting.
But they certainly took him as their father. They never even spoke of their father. I don't think they much knew their father because Mom left him when they were very, very little.
Interesting.
So as far as a father figure, my dad was it.
He was there.
And as far as brothers and sisters, that I didn't even know that they had another father until much later in life. You know, it wasn't even discussed. Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit in general about, maybe not at that time, but looking back on the generosity of your brother musically and how much he actually believed in you? Did he ever acknowledge it verbally, or it was just basically he liked your style? I just want you to talk about his philosophy, how much it impacted you as a young musician, how it helped you.
I'd like to know more, Jake, because my brother wasn't the type of person to talk about feelings and
but through his actions, looking at his actions.
Well, in hindsight, through his actions, he obviously believed in me. I mean, he could have had anybody play bass for him. He could have asked anyone; they would have done it. You know, so the fact that he asked me, and I was certainly flattered by it, and my confidence was greatly bolstered by him inviting me to do those sessions, because that was still early on. That was before Stone Ground and a lot of other stuff that I did, and it gave me the confidence in my work that I could pretty much, you know, if I can cut it with these guys, I can cut it. You know, never like cocky, because I always felt like I had a lot to learn, because I was being challenged by playing with players that were much more experienced than me. I mean, when I started playing with Nick Gravenitis and Mike Bloomfield and Butterfield, those guys were coming down every night to John's house. I didn't know the first thing about the blues. Not a thing. Nothing.
That is so fucking badass. Can you talk about...
And I listened. Yeah. What's that?
No, I just really want... This is important. You know, you want... Can you talk about how you learned that stuff, how those guys treated you, and how you... I mean, because I...
Yeah.
I mean, here's... I mean, it's like easy... I mean, I know... just being in general, I mean, to know who these figures were, and then to figure out like how to feel comfortable that you belong in the same space as them.
Right.
Can you just talk about how you were accepted? Maybe you weren't accepted. I mean, talk about learning experiences of that at that time.
Yeah. It's kind of, you know, to be honest with you, like an example of that is Dan Healy. You know who Dan Healy is, the engineer?
I've been looking to talk to that motherfucker for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I can get you hooked up with Dan.
I need to talk to Healy. I want to talk to him about Albert Hoffman's Bicycle, because he was playing bass in that band for a long time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan and I are still close, but even though we're close, and I'm an adult, here I am, I'm 60-something years old, and Dan to me is still my kind of mean older brother. Because he was one guy that never gave me a fucking inch of slack. You know, like if I was acting like a kid and it was, you know, he would be all up in my shit about it. You know, he was not forgiving like everybody else seemed to be. You know,
because that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, he was Quicksilver's engineer before he ever worked for the Dead. He was their engineer for years.
I don't think I even knew that. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, he helped design John's amp rig.
Sure.
He was the main designer, actually, John's amp. Between John and Dan, that's how that system came to be. Which means that Dan Healy made the first guitar pedal board ever made. And numerous other. I mean, was a real innovator, you know.
Oh my God, Healy, dude, that is sick. So,
yeah.
But he wasn't.
So what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I talked to you probably know the engineer from Fantasy, Jim Stern.
Sure.
Okay, so Sterno said that. I mean, he just said that. I wonder if Healy just was. I mean, obviously, he was a genius technologically, but I'm not sure if he was ever really in the same musician class as the other, like Butter or
No,
Bloomfield.
no.
Maybe he was just an insecure guy, but he really did treat you like a kid. I know that feeling.
Yeah. I have. Whenever I'm gonna go see him, or if I'm ever gonna call him or write to him, I always immediately become 10 years old and slightly fearful. And I've told him that. I told him, I said, I'll always be a punk kid. My brother's little snotty nosed little brother in my eyes to you. I just can't shake it. It's permanent. I wish it wasn't there, because I think he and I would be able to be a lot closer, but I can't. I can't get there. I can't get on an even footing with him in my mind and my heart and stuff. I just can't do it. It's just the way it was. So, but that's an example of part of how I negotiated those fields was that, for one thing, Dan was there from day one when we started doing those sessions, so I always had someone kind of to watch out for. Because I knew that it's not that he was an enemy, but he wasn't going to give me any slack. He was a tough guy, and whereas my brother, somebody else might not give a shit if I acted like a kid. Dan certainly did, and in a funny way, you mentioned. Oh boy, I better watch it here.
Yeah.
You mentioned Dan's chops. To someone who's a well-known engineer, and also he was known as a musician also, to have some punk kid in there, playing rings around him. Maybe there was a weird,
No, I'm telling you, man. Because I mean, listen, I know I did that interview with Stern, and Healy had aspirations to be. They eventually took Lesh, but I think Healy wanted that gig. He just didn't have the chops. I guarantee you, he was a little bit insecure that here's this young acid freak Mario Cipollina, acting like a 13-year-old, and he's. Again, he had his role, but he really did want to be a musician, I think.
I think so, too. And that's the case with a lot of engineers and bus drivers and truck drivers and, you name it.
Yeah, athletes, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of people in the crews, want to be there and aren't. And some of them are bitter about it. Some of them aren't, We had a bus driver try to kill us because he was so jealous. He watched us go from nobody to somebody big, and it drove him crazy. He tried to, he took a bunch of that bus driver who I just mentioned was jealous, took a bunch of tranquilizers and was drinking at the wheel while we were asleep in the bus. He was trying to commit suicide with us asleep in the bus.
God, Jesus Christ!
Yeah, that was scary.
That was with the news.
Yeah.
Going back to this, this is so fascinating. I mean, do you believe that again, we're going back to the physiology part of it, but
make a note of that bus thing, because we should get to that someday.
Oh no, we will get to that. Yeah, no, I got a whole bunch of the tranquilizer bus driver.
Yeah.
Do you believe? You talked about that feeling of invincibility before the crash. When you get to this fearlessness, this you can do anything. You got, your soldering stuff. But did that fearlessness come in? Was it just? What am I trying to say? I mean, did that start with your brother at those sessions? That feeling of, especially if you were tripping out and playing music with guys that were much older than you. I mean, what was that? How did that leave an imprint on you looking back on it? I mean, I don't know many cats that had that experience.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that was a big. I think the first inkling of self-confidence was when I was playing classically, and I started, was playing string bass, and I had to go to bass lessons every week, and I didn't like practicing, so I didn't practice very much, and sometimes I'd go a week and not practice at all. But I would always get better, and it really bothered my teacher. In fact, she had a number of talks with my mom about getting me to to practice more because my natural ability was keeping me from being dutiful with practice.
I understand.
And I have some concern with students now that I teach when they have a certain amount of natural ability, they seem to work less at it, which means that they're setting themselves up to be less technically capable because they're just sliding on their natural ability, which I did. You know, there's a lot of things I would like to be able to do on the bass that had I been better at practicing and learned more diligence, I would be a much more technically proficient player. There'd be things that I don't have access to now that I would have access to. And that, you know, that's the disadvantage, I think, of having a really natural ability and a really being, you know, I'll say this, if I was gifted with anything, it's having a good ear. I can hear stuff, you know, and I'm a good listener, and that's pretty much how I made it through all those kind of tougher situations, like playing with my brother. How did I learn to play blues, you know, fast? I listened. You know, I listened to what they were doing, and I could hear what I was doing that wasn't making sense with it. And like I've got some recordings of those sessions, and you can hear when I first started playing with when Bloomfield and Butterfield and Nick were coming down early on. I wasn't getting it, man. I was doing rock stuff over blues stuff, and it was a little. They were pretty nice to put up with it for the whatever amount of time it took me to figure out some more appropriate patterns, you know. But you know, because they didn't give me the boot, and I was given enough time to be there and use my ear, I was adapting and learning quickly, you know. So that's I think is that was just another example to me that my ear worked, and it was my friend, and I've always considered that to be my strong suit. That's why I like jamming so much. I'm good at it because I listen.
That's right. You know? I dig. Did you? I transcribed this interview I did with Pete Sears. And
oh, good, really?
Well, I talked to him a long time ago, and we need to do another interview. He's such a sweetheart. But he told me this session. He told me about this the first time he met Garcia. Wound up going down to, I think it was K-San, and you were on bass. Jerry was on.
That was.
Jerry was
I put that session together.
You want to talk? Can you talk? Because Jerry, I think, was on pedal steel. Your brother was there. I don't. Can you talk?
Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
How'd that happen?
It was amazing. Well, as you know, I was friends of the Donahue's family, and Donahue was the boss of K-San, originally awesome. KMPX, and then he took over K-San, and that became his baby. And the nighttime DJ down there, the 10 to 4 guy or whatever, who was a great guy, a guy named Richard Gossett. And he was good friends of Big Daddy's, and so I met Richard and knew him well, actually, before I ever went to K-San. And by that time, I'm playing with Stoneground, and so I got a little credibility, you know, and I knew all these guys, right? So I told Pete and my brother, and John told Jerry, and on drums I had Mickey Waller, who played the original drummer from the Faces.
Wow.
And Jeff Beck Group. He was the drummer on Jeff Beck's first album. So I had him on drums, and Pete came and played keys, and who had finished the Gasoline Alley thing and finally came back. That was, you know, after I had already, you know, covered for him and got that job. But so I had this idea. Richard and I were talking at Donahue's house one day, and he said, well, so he said, you know, do you know how long it's been since anyone's done a live broadcast in studio of any live music? And I said, no. He said, it's been since the 40s.
Really?
I guess that's what he said. I don't know. You know, that's what he said, and I certainly hadn't heard of any, you know, in studio. Now we're talking. There's a difference between, you know, remote and in studio.
Absolutely,
studio,
absolutely. Yeah.
So he really wanted to try this. And he knew that I was kind of a technician. I haven't told you this, but I was the apprentice for an electronics engineer and inventor named Alan Fitzgerald. He's one of the inventors of radar. He had the patent for the electric eye, and he had 2 books of U.S. patents, 2 full books, hardbound books. And he was a really cool old English man, and I started working with him when I was 10.
Wow.
So I had learned a lot about electronics by the time, a few years later. And so Richard and I were talking about this live broadcast idea, and I had been doing sessions at my brother's, so I had, John's ear, and I had also seen how to put together a jerry-rigged recording setup because John had done it at his house. So I asked my brother, I said, can I borrow those Sony mixers that we're using, and bring them over to KSAN and kind of rig it together and we could play live? Would that be cool? And he said, sure. So I packed up all the adapters and the Sony mixers and my brother and all these guys, and we all went over to KSAN one night. I went early, set up the gear, and somehow made it work. I was probably on acid. I assume I was. I always was. And we did a recording, a live broadcast in the studio from KSAN with a full band.
There's a soundboard of it on the internet.
There is?
Yes. Yes.
I've been looking for it because I had the tape. In fact, I have a note that I put on, because I used to leave notes on the door for my mom. If I'd had a late night or something, I'd leave a note saying, I was up all night, don't wake me up, blah, blah, blah. and that night, I have the note. Somewhere I have the note that my mom saved, the note that I'd left for her. It said, Mom, session was amazing. Don't worry, I've got the tapes. That was my note to my mom. Don't wake me. Don't worry, I've got the tapes.
As if, she's jonesing for those. No, I'll get you the link to that because you can download it.
Too, please.
Yeah. No.
Oh my God, I'd give anything to hear it. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what we did.
Did you ever listen? Did you listen back? Did you have a chance to ever listen back to it? Did you hear about? Did you get a chance?
Yeah, sure.
Like, what did you think?
Yeah.
How did you? And you were 14 or something at this time, or 15?
15. If we did that session, I'm pretty sure I was 15.
And yeah, were you at that point? Like, did you feel like you should, like the recording was good? You felt like you sounded good. You felt comfortable in the room and everything. That was essentially you weren't playing with. So who was in the?
I was proud of it. I remember thinking, man, we pulled that one off. It was definitely not shit. There was good. There were definitely good moments. How technically, I don't know how many buzzes and hums there might have been. I assume there's some.
I'm gonna go dig that up right after this. I'm gonna send that to you.
Oh man, I want to hear it. Right
no, man, this is. Yeah, I was gonna say because not too soon after that, it started to become kind of trendy. If you guys really were the first since the 40s. I remember seeing a lot of KSAN stuff right after 70 or whatever that was. Yeah.
And then people started doing like regular. There was a thing live from the record plant. I can't remember what radio station was doing that. There was one where they were broadcasting out of the record plant in Sausalito, and that was a weekly show. And there were a number of them. Yeah,
there's a Pacific High Recordings.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure, there was a bevy of stuff. I just I wanted you to just talk, just riff on this quote and how it relates to you. You might have heard of the percussionist M. Tume. Did you ever hear that cat before?
I haven't. I think I've heard him, but I honestly don't. I probably couldn't place him in a crowd at the moment.
No, of course, he was a percussionist with Miles Davis. He's Jimmy Heath's son. He did a whole bunch of. He retired in '97. Okay. His stuff is heavily sampled. But he said, he goes. We have become sonically lazy. He said the only cat who ever broke out of the box was Sun Ra. The rest of us, I don't care what avenue we take, we're still in that box. And he goes on to talk about being more inventive, creating new instruments.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your evolution sonically, like how you became more sonically aware? I mean, did the LSD have a lot to do with that? Is there something that, because you guys were, like you talked about, Healy and your brother were building those guitar pedal boards, and you were steeped in electronics. I mean, basically, if you take a background in electronics and then you're drinking Orange Sunshine liquid acid, you're going to be sonically expanded.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, can you just talk about how you?
I designed the amp that I used with Soundhole for years. It was an amp I designed, and that a friend of mine who was an engineer built it for me. It was the first op amp I've ever heard of, the first digital amplifier I've ever heard of being used. In fact, I hadn't heard of one being used for years after that. I was using a digital amplifier when I was 13, 14. And
I guess maybe the question more is like, how did you learn to increase the sonic nature of the music in your in the live setting? Like how did you learn to do that? Not necessarily Sun Ra, but
I don't think I pushed any envelopes early on. I think the most envelope pushing I've done was in the 10 years that I was working on that solo stuff that I was doing, which was I wanted to make an album that just was bass, and I wanted to see how many different sounds, how many different roles a bass could fill. Which started off with playing a 7-string bass for starters. It's a little bit of a stretch, and then I also wanted to make an album where every track was a full performance. Like you and I were talking about that, some of the stuff that you heard of my solo album, and you said it sounded overdone, and part of that reason for that is that I wanted to cover a lot of ground with the bass, and so but I didn't want to use any digital editing or punching. I wanted, because that's one I was rebelling against the contemporary insistence on using digital editing and copying and pasting tracks.
Pro Tools. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and I just refused to do it. I wouldn't. And so one of my two goals were that it's only going to be bass and drums, and that if any sound I want has got to be made with a bass, and it's got to be every track. Since I can only play one thing at a time, so I couldn't do it all at once. But any track that I did was a complete performance from beginning to end. I never stopped and backed up and punched in, which is why it took 10 years to make it, because it's hard. It's hard. It's a lot easier to, everybody at least punches in. Like you make a mistake and you can go back and then pop in and grab it, hit record, and go over the shitty little mistake, and then punch out and have the rest of it there. Like make a little. You're aware of what I'm talking about, punching in.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's not considered even cheating. That's just normal. But I really wanted to. But there's something about a track that is a performance that I value, and that I think that everyone has grown to absolutely disavow any value in it. So that was part of the album, was an exercise in saying fuck that, and it was hard. It was hard to make a bass sound like a squeeze box, without any digital synthetics of any kind. It's hard. It took a lot of goofing around. This just popped into my head, but it's like really, and I just want you to throw all the modesty out the window. But I doubt if I answered your question. By the way, I don't even remember what the question was. Sorry.
No, we're just having a jam. I found that quote from Mtume. What's crazy is I called him this morning because he's He's very close with Dr. Cornel West. You know that professor at Princeton.
I don't know who.
Well, he's the big afro, very outspoken guy. If you saw him, you'd know who he was. But I call up M2May, and he calls me back, and he's in the fucking hospital because he can't move his legs. And I told him about your story about I don't think they had a stroke, but they want to do like 4 MRIs on him. It's just, this life is so fleeting. But did you?
It is. I hate that.
But we're still here, so we need to hit it. But I think that even though, so you, as best you can, did you feel that that you wanted to? Miroslav Vichua said that when Weather Report started, he's an arrogant German cat, obviously, to a degree, but he said, the difference with him is he was adding a voice to the music. He wasn't keeping the rhythm. He was adding his own voice. And when you're coming around with Stanley Clarke, and you're coming around with to a lesser extent, Richard Laird or Miroslav. Did you feel like in that Copperhead period? Obviously, you talked about playing before blues, fast blues, but did you ever feel like you were also really trying to kind of do a Jaco Pastorius kind of thing in the Mario Cipollina sense, where you wanted to speak and have your voice heard, as opposed to just locking the groove?
In a way, I still do. I tell you, Jake. I was just talking with somebody about this. I feel I'm really grateful to have had the success that I've had with my my band and stuff, but and I'm on a lot of product out there. There's a lot. We made a lot of albums. We sold a lot of albums, but there's nothing that I've. There's no body of work of mine, or even there's no track that is a bass track of mine that's been recorded and released that I am completely. That I think exposes what I love about my playing.
Really?
Or what I think is,
Wow.
Nothing. And that's a little bit of a frustration, being that I'm, kind of getting in the twilight of my career. It probably ain't going to happen, and that's a bit of a frustration to have gained all this notoriety and feel like no one even knows what I can do.
Well, okay, so let's just focus on what is in your mind. Can you target a couple of things? Because you're pretty hard on yourself. Can you talk about
a couple? It's just an attitude. There's an attitude that I have about bass and music that I've had to suppress for my whole career because it didn't fit in the pop. It certainly didn't fit with Huey Lewis and the News, and so I just stuffed it, and it's been stuffed, and that's what comes out when I play with Kenny. And I've never even sent you any of that stuff, have I?
No, not yet.
Jam stuff.
Not well, yeah.
That, man. I've gone through so many things, and to get ready to send them to you, and I keep thinking, he doesn't want to listen to this, just because it's so stream of consciousness, and it's so. But in there lays, I think, and I will send you something. I will send you some stuff. In there lays, you'll hear a certain naughty, fuck you, life is short, turn this shit up kind of attitude that I just have never been able to put forth, either because it wasn't appropriate with the music, which basically is why the music I've had the opportunity to record and release was not appropriate. It wasn't the way to support those songs.
Absolutely, so but you have to be. But
fuck you, dirty boy. Play it loud and play it mean. Never was an issue. Just never was appropriate.
But you feel like that's been expressed, just not on record. It's in the ethos. It's in this. It's in this.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you have.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah. Is there anything? Is there any even before you join the News? Anything that even says you're like, oh, that's almost what I was getting at. Is there anything that even comes close to anything in any body of recorded work that even comes close to what your ideal of what your naughty boy sound is?
That's been released? No.
Yeah, the mix on that Tony Williams stuff is a disaster. I can't even hear you on that shit.
Wait. Now you mentioned there's a couple of seconds in the Live Under the Sky thing that I think, yeah. Well, in fact, it's a Tony Williams song, Red Alert. No, Red Alert. There's a couple of seconds in there where I just went fuck it. I started playing chords and I blew up. Every piece of gear they gave me, I blew up at that show. By the way,
I love it.
Everything, my entire rig was completely destroyed, and I think Ronnie's was too. We were loud at that show. I mean, there were 5 nights at that concert, at that show, and the other 4 nights were all acoustic jazz. Tony opened the 5 nights with his band, which was us. It was Brian Auger, Ronnie Montrose, me, Tony, and Billy Cobham, and Ronnie Montrose, and we had a wall. An 8-foot tall wall of amps across the entire stage at an acoustic jazz concert. Man, people didn't know what the hell was happening.
Well, you were playing upright bass?
Hell no. No, I was playing electric.
But so it wasn't acoustic. I mean, it was electric.
No, but the other 4 nights were. And traditionally, it was McCoy Tyner night. It was just all very.
Other cats were playing acoustic jazz, but then you guys.
Yeah.
Oh my, that must have been.
And we were Tony Williams night, and Tony had always been traditional. He had never gone out. They were expecting Tony Williams, the drummer from Miles Davis.
Right.
And we came in there as the Barbarians of Love.
Total barbarian. I mean, barbarians beyond the.
That's what he named the band.
The Barbarians of Love. Oh my God!
Man, we made an album that was absolutely dick in the dirt, nasty, man. In fact, there's a perfect example. All the stuff out there is the stuff of my work that I was talking to you about, but it didn't get released because CBS was scared to death of it. They paid for the whole album and then shelved it.
So this is different. This is something different from Flying or whatever, that Eagle one. This is a different thing.
Yeah, it never came out.
You have any cassettes of it or anything like that, or no?
I had all the mix. I had all kinds of mixed masters of it, which I lost over the years. And somebody on the internet sent through Facebook sent me 4 or 5 rough tracks, and I'll send them to you. There's some amazing shit.
With the Barbarians of Love? That's the Barbarians of Love?
Yeah.
See, that's the kind of stuff I want to hear that immediately.
Not the band from Japan. It's Tony and me, and then there was two other guitar players who were both into punk rock.
Oh.
And Tony wanted them because they were punk rock, and he wanted to mix it up. He was a great guy. And talk about being willing to stretch out and try new shit. There's Tony Williams, man.
Well, the amount of sort of, I know we'll get into it some other time, but the idea that you got the cold call out of the blue. I mean, I remember, I want to get this story right, but great drummer Alan Schwartzberg, nasty studio drummer on the East Coast, and idolized Tony, and then I forgot the exact story. Tony was such a mercurial cat. He almost didn't ever want people to see him, to be in awe of him. He got embarrassed by that. He really He really didn't want that. Like I think that's what it was. Like he called Alan. He's like, "Hey man," and so Alan's floored, as you were when he called. I mean, he called Alan. This is probably going back to the late '60s or something. He's like, "Hey man, you're pretty dialed into the studio scene. Can you get me some gigs? And Alan was just like, kind of like, just freaking out. And he's like, Tony, I'd do anything for you, man. He's like, I anything you want, man. I'll give you any, I can hook you up. And by the end of the conversation, Tony was like, he just didn't like the way, he just didn't want to feel like that he was held in that kind of respect. And he's like, no, it's okay, man. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And he just hung up.
Yeah, I could see that.
Right? Man, it was like
He
this.
was very, very humble, very, very sweet,
Right.
quiet guy. Yeah.
And just
I'm looking for the picture. In fact, the picture, we shot an album cover photo for that album, and I'll send it to you. I have to find it. I definitely have that somewhere though. And it's me and Pete Monyu, who was the band leader for Arsenio Hall's show. Pete Monyu, one of these punk guitar players, and the other one was Brian Marnell, who was a guitar player in Soundhole, who went on to have a band called SVT with Jack Cassidy. That was a full-blown punk band. I don't know if you ever heard them. They're a great band.
I just find it funny because Arsenio is coming to Tucson in like 3 days, and his publicist just cock blocked me on an email. Fucking bitch. I want to talk to Arsenio.
Really?
Yeah, but here's I want to. This is important. I want you to talk to people out there when you are not. When you are in a good state of mind, or even just an even keeled state of mind, or you're operating on a normal track, why should people who suffer from manic depression in different forms not feel shame and not be afraid?
Why should they not?
Yes.
Well, I think they better.
They should be
afraid. You're going to be judged.
I just want to get back to these things. I mean, you're from Catholic school. You were brought up that you were going to be an awful human being. The shame and being afraid. I think that this is something that one reason you're still on this planet is you've overcome that stuff. You continually overcome it. How do you overcome? Talk to the other people that will read your book about how, not even how, but why you have to overcome it. Why shouldn't you submit to being afraid and shamed?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay. Because you know what? My wife tried. Yeah. Listen, a lot of times on my journey, I'll just leave you with this because I got a bolt. But, okay. My wife, a lot of times, I mean, she's Taiwanese, and she comes from a very shaming culture, and you should feel ashamed if you don't wash a dish a certain way, or if you break something, or if you waste food. And in my case, with the Jake Feinberg show, I mean, we're doing our taxes, and it's like, net minus $3,000 for the year. I'm like, I'm not making a lot of money. And so she has consistently tried to...
You're getting your payout on the tail end, Jake.
Don't worry about it. Dude,
you're getting your payout on the backside.
Yeah, man. Listen, spirit is the only currency, Mario. All right, so that's it.
Yeah.
But you know what? But she has tried to break. In the darker times, or she can't understand. She doesn't know who Mario Cipollina is. She doesn't know who Pete Sears is. She doesn't know. She doesn't understand any of this shit. It's too abstract for her. You see the stories I put up. It's feeding me. But she has tried. Yeah. She has tried to shame me into either going back into teaching or to do something just very. Part of it is she loves me, but part of it is also saying, why are you so unconventional? Why do you have to do?
It's also, Jake. Let's face it. A lot of it's fear.
It is, and so what I'm trying to say is, all I can say is, Mario, that I want you to think about this for next time because it's an important part of the book. For me, I have never. Every time I hear that, it doesn't necessarily make me more emboldened to move forward. It's just I am unwavering, and I don't allow shame. I don't care that I don't put on a suit and tie and make $80,000 a year. I don't care. You're not going to shame me. You are not going to shame me from stopping what my life force mission is. And I just think
that's great. That's one thing I love that about you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then so I think I want you to, as best you can, talk about why, even if you are saddled, or if you have some depression or anxiety, or you're in fear, don't let it own you. Why?
Okay, I got you. Yeah. Okay, yep.
And so just think about that, and we'll. Tomorrow's not so good, but maybe Monday we can pick it up. I really am having a.
Let me know, Jake. Yeah. I'll make myself available whenever you have time, and if you have stuff, in advance, like this topic that you want me to try and be a little prepared for, a heads up is great. But if not, we'll jam it like we do. But this is working for me. I hope it's working for you.
No, I think we're covering. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on. It's going to all come together, and I'm really having a ball.
But it's going to say a lot to you as a writer to be able to turn this into something cohesive.
Well, yeah, you just
you can do it. I know you can.
let it flow out. I mean, the transcription. Yeah, we'll I think we have to do about 3 or 4 more of these until we can see what direction we're headed in. But yeah, if you can talk about sort of being and if you have, now that you have time to think about it, specific examples of when you were beating the hell out of yourself for or feeling shame or feeling fear, and then saying, "Damn it, I'm not going to let this own me. I'm not going to let this take my life. I'm going to keep living and being the fucking, naughty boy bass player." These are the.
And I get. Not only do I get what you're looking for, but I get why you're looking for it. I hear you.
Exactly. All right.
I do. I hear you.
All right.
Okay.
Straight ahead.
You have a great day, man.
You too, man. Great to hear you, man. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jake. Good to talk to you.
Cheers, man.